My son's grip was too tight on my shoulder as he leaned in. "The doctor said it's your heart, Mom. You need to rest." His voice was smooth, but his eyes were flat. I lay in my bed, the floral sheets scratchy against my skin. I'd felt the strange stillness creeping in again, the same faintness that made my limbs heavy and my breath shallow. But this time, my children were gathered around, not with concern, but with a quiet efficiency that chilled me. My daughter placed a glass of water on the nightstand. "Drink this. It'll help you sleep." I took a small sip, the water tasting metallic. I forced a weak smile. "Thank you, dear." Inside, I was stitching every detail together. The hurried whispers I'd caught earlier, the way they'd already moved my documents from the drawer. They thought I was fading, but my mind was sharp, recording it all. You know how it is when family starts treating you like a burden? The little dismissals add up. I closed my eyes, feigning drowsiness, but I listened. I heard my son on the phone in the hall, his voice low. "Yes, tonight. The papers are ready." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my breathing even. Then the room shifted. The faintness deepened into paralysis. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, but I could hear everything. They were discussing the funeral arrangements as if I were already gone. My own children, planning my end while I lay trapped in this shell. Their greed was stealing my very breath. But in the silence, I made a promise to myself. I would remember this. I would find a way out. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. A neighbor's voice called out, "Is everything all right?" My daughter hurried to the door. "She's sleeping, thank you." She didn't let them in. The moment passed, and the house fell quiet again. Then I felt hands lifting me, wrapping me in a sheet. The world went dark as they carried me away. The ride was bumpy, the van's engine humming too loud. I was zipped inside a bag, the fabric pressing against my face. I focused on the sounds. Tires on gravel, the distant siren of a police car, my son's muttered curses about traffic. They thought I was dead. But my condition, this cursed catalepsy, had fooled them before. It had fooled doctors too. Now it was my only shield. We stopped. Doors slammed. I heard my daughter's voice, crisp and businesslike. "The crypt is unlocked. Let's be quick." The air changed, turning damp and cold. Stone scraped against stone as they slid me onto a hard surface. I could smell moss and old wood. They were in the family crypt, the place where my husband lay. I'd always hated it here, the darkness so absolute. I just had to stay calm and wait for the paralysis to pass. But the silence was so intense it was driving me insane. They were relentless, working quickly with no prayers or tears. Just the thud of the lid being placed over me. Then suddenly a phone vibrated. My son answered, his voice tense. "The lawyer? Tomorrow? Yes. We'll be there." He hung up. "We need to finish this before anyone asks questions." A chilling thought struck me. They weren't just burying me. They were already on their way to meet the lawyer and claim everything. I felt a crack in my resolve. How could I fight back from here? But then, a faint scraping sound started above, like metal on stone. It was subtle, but it was there. Something was moving outside the crypt. The scraping grew louder, then stopped. Silence fell again, thicker than before. I strained to hear, but only the drip of water echoed in the crypt. My body was still locked, but sensation was returning to my fingertips, a prickling heat. I focused on that, on breathing slowly through the cloth of the bag. I needed to move, to signal, but I was entombed. My children had left me here, believing their inheritance was secure. The injustice burned. Decades of love, reduced to this cold betrayal. You might think you know your family, but greed changes people. Now, I needed to escape before I suffocated. Every second felt like an eternity, heavy and slow. Suddenly, a creak echoed, the crypt door opening. Footsteps, light and hesitant. A voice, unfamiliar, whispered, "Hello? Someone there?" Hope surged, but I couldn't make a sound. The footsteps came closer, then paused by my container. I felt a hand brush against the lid. Strange. It's loose. Then the pressure shifted. The lid was being lifted. Light seeped through the bag. I held my breath, praying it wasn't my children returning. The bag was unzipped, and fresh air hit my face. A young man peered down, his eyes wide with shock. "You're alive," he gasped. But before I could speak, a shadow fell over us. My son's voice cut through the gloom. "What are you doing here? This is private property." The young man jerked back, dropping the lid with a clatter. I I was just checking. The door was open. My son stepped forward, his face hard. "She's dead. Show some respect." I lay perfectly still, playing dead again. My mind raced. This stranger was my chance, but my son was here, blocking it. The young man stammered, "I'm from the Historical Society. We survey old crypts." My son grabbed his arm. "Leave. Now." I heard the scuffle, then retreating footsteps. The crypt door slammed shut, plunging me back into darkness. My son's voice was a low growl. "Damn kids snooping around." He didn't check on me. He just left. The lock clicked from outside. I was alone again, but now I knew the lid wasn't sealed tight. Air was seeping in. My focus changed. I had to pry the lid open before I lost my strength. I was gripped by the fear that he might return at any moment. I wriggled my fingers, then my arms, feeling the paralysis ebb. I pushed against the lid, but it was heavy. Stone grated as I shifted it inch by inch. Then abruptly, a phone rang outside, its sound muffled. My daughter's voice. "The notary moved the meeting to today. We need to go now." Their footsteps faded. I was alone, but time was short. I shoved harder, and the lid slid aside. I sat up, gasping in the stale air. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw it. A small, dusty ledger on a shelf nearby, filled with my husband's handwriting. I reached for it, my hands trembling. The first page was a list of dates and payments to my son, for years. The ledger felt heavy in my hands, the pages brittle with age. My husband had been secretly giving money to our son, large sums, marked for future care. But care for whom? Not for me, clearly. I tucked it into my dress, the paper crinkling against my chest. I needed to get out of this crypt and to safety. The door was locked, but there was a small, high window covered in grime. If I could reach it, I might signal for help. I stacked some old crates, my bones aching with the effort. This escape was draining all the strength I had left. I climbed, the wood groaning under my weight. Through the dirty glass, I saw the cemetery grounds, empty, just rows of headstones under a grey sky. No one in sight. Then suddenly, a car engine started nearby. My children's sedan pulled away, speeding toward the gates. They were gone for now. I rubbed the glass clean, but it was thick and reinforced. I couldn't break it. My hands were raw from trying. Suddenly, a figure appeared outside, an older woman walking a dog. I waved frantically, but she didn't see me. She moved on, disappearing behind a mausoleum. Defeat washed over me. But as I turned, my foot slipped, and I fell against the wall. A loose brick shifted, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a key, rusty, but familiar. The key to the crypt door. My husband must have hidden it for emergencies. I clutched it, my heart pounding. But as I fitted it into the lock, I heard a vehicle returning. Headlights swept across the window. They were back. The key turned smoothly, but I froze as the headlights brightened. I slipped back into the shadows, behind a large stone sarcophagus, just as the crypt door creaked open. My son's voice was sharp with irritation. "I told you we should have used the newer vault. This place is falling apart." My daughter sighed. "It was free, and no one questions a family plot. Now where is she? We need to make sure everything looks undisturbed before the lawyer arrives." Their footsteps echoed on the stone floor. I held my breath, the ledger a hard rectangle against my ribs. They approached the container I'd just escaped. "The lid is off," my daughter hissed. "Did that kid from before do this?" My son cursed. "She's gone." The silence that followed was heavier than the stone around us. I could feel their panic. Then, my son's phone lit up the dim space as he called someone. "There's a problem. She's not here." A pause. "No, we searched. She couldn't have gone far in her condition." His words were a cold splash of reality. My condition. They still thought I was a feeble, dying woman. They had no idea I was listening, mere feet away, with proof of their betrayal in my hands. I knew what I had to do. Get out of this crypt and find a safe place to think. If I failed, they would discover me. And they were already here, with their resources and lies closing in. I pressed deeper into the shadows as my daughter's phone rang. She answered, her voice suddenly sweet. "Yes, Mr. Davies. We're just dealing with a small family matter. We'll be at your office shortly." She hung up. "The notary is waiting. We have to go. We'll come back and search properly later." They left, locking the door behind them. I waited until the car engine faded. Then I moved. The key was still in the lock. I turned it and pushed the heavy door open. The cool evening air was the sweetest thing I'd ever tasted. But as I stepped out, I saw a figure standing by a nearby grave, watching me. It was the woman with the dog from earlier. She raised a hand, not in greeting, but in a silent, knowing gesture. The woman didn't approach. She simply pointed toward the cemetery's main gate, then turned and walked away, her small dog trotting beside her. A warning, or an offer of help. I had no time to decipher it. I moved quickly, keeping to the shadows of the mausoleums, my body stiff and aching. I needed to get home. My house was my fortress, my documents, my safe. But would it still be safe? My children had keys. They could be there now, shredding papers, covering their tracks. The bus stop was 2 blocks away. I could make it if I hurried. Every rustle of leaves made me jump. I felt exposed under the streetlights. An older person moving with purpose at this hour might draw attention, but moving slowly felt like surrender. I reached the bus stop and slumped on the bench, my breath fogging in the chill air. The ledger felt like a brand against my skin. I needed a plan, not just escape. I would go home, retrieve my own copies of the will and the power of attorney I'd granted my son last year, a mistake I now bitterly regretted. Then I would go to my friend, Eleanor, a retired legal secretary. She would know what to do. The bus arrived, its doors hissing open. The driver, a young man with a bored expression, barely glanced at me as I used my senior pass. I found a seat near the back. The pressure was immense. They thought I was dead, and that gave me a small advantage, but it wouldn't last. As the bus pulled away, a familiar car sped past us, my son's sedan. They were heading back toward the cemetery. They'd realized their mistake sooner than I'd hoped. I slid lower in my seat. Then my phone, which I'd thought was dead, vibrated in my pocket. A text message from an unknown number. The locks have been changed. The text was a shock. Who sent it? The woman from the cemetery? It didn't matter. The message was clear. My home was no longer my sanctuary. My children were acting fast, securing their assets. I got off at the next stop, my mind racing. I couldn't go home. I needed another base, somewhere they wouldn't think to look. I thought of the community centre where I played bridge on Tuesdays. It was open late for a pottery class. It would be warm, public, and have a phone. I walked the 3 blocks, my legs protesting. The centre was brightly lit, the sound of laughter and clinking clay a jarring contrast to the silent crypt. I went straight to the payphone near the restrooms, fumbling for coins. I called Eleanor. Her voice, warm and familiar, was a lifeline. "Martha, is that you? Your daughter called me earlier. She said you'd passed away. I've been grieving all afternoon." My blood ran cold. They had already spread the news. "Eleanor, listen carefully. I am not dead. My children tried to bury me alive. I'm at the community centre. I need your help." There was a stunned silence. Then her tone shifted to all business. "Don't move. I'm coming to get you. Do not trust anyone." I hung up, leaning against the wall. The pressure was shifting. I had an ally. But as I waited, I saw a man in a suit enter the centre. He wasn't a regular. He scanned the room, his eyes lingering on me. He pulled out his phone and spoke quietly into it. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw him nod. Then he looked directly at me and started walking over. I moved away, heading for the women's restroom. It was a single occupancy. I locked the door behind me, my heart thudding. I heard his footsteps stop outside. A knock. "Ma'am, I'm with the building management. We have a report of a water leak. I need to check the pipes." His voice was too smooth. I didn't answer. I looked at the small, high window. It was my only way out. But I was 74, not 24. Could I even reach it? The man outside jiggled the doorknob. "Ma'am, I really need you to open up." I ignored him, my eyes fixed on the window. I dragged the small trash bin over, standing on it to give me a boost. My arms screamed in protest as I hauled myself up, gripping the sill. The window was old, painted shut. I used my keys to scrape at the flaking paint, chipping it away frantically. Below me, the knocking turned to a more insistent thudding. He was trying to force the door. With a final scrape, the window loosened. I shoved it open, a cold gust of wind hitting my face. The drop to the alley below was about 8 feet, too far for my old bones. I could break a hip. But staying meant being caught by whoever this man was. I heard the door splintering. No choice. I swung my legs out, turned, and lowered myself as far as I could, then let go. I landed hard on my feet, a jolt of pain shooting up my ankles. I stumbled, but stayed upright. I hurried down the alley, away from the lights of the street. I emerged onto a quiet residential road. I needed to find Eleanor. She would be looking for me at the community centre's main entrance. I crept along the side of the building, peering around the corner. I saw her car parked right out front, and I saw the man in the suit talking to her, pointing back toward the building. He was intercepting my rescue. Eleanor looked confused, then concerned. She nodded at whatever he was saying. Was he convincing her I was delusional? That I'd had a mental break? I had to get to her before he poisoned her against me. I took a deep breath and stepped out from the shadows, walking directly toward her car. Eleanor saw me first. Her eyes widened in shock. The man in the suit turned, his expression shifting from smooth persuasion to sheer alarm. "Eleanor," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. We need to leave. Now. The man reached for my arm. Mrs. Wilkins, you're not well. Let me help you. Eleanor's gaze darted from him to me. She saw the dirt on my clothes, the wild look in my eyes, the determined set of my jaw. She made her choice. Get in the car, Martha, she said, unlocking the doors. I pulled my arm away from the man and slid into the passenger seat. As we drove off, I looked back. He was already on his phone, his face a mask of fury. We weren't safe yet. Eleanor drove without speaking for several blocks, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Finally, she glanced at me. They said you died of a heart attack. They were planning your memorial. I pulled the ledger from my dress. They planned more than that. They buried me in the family crypt. And look at this. I handed her the brittle book. She pulled over under a streetlight and flipped through the pages. Her face grew grim. These are payments from your husband to your son, Robert. Large ones. For years. She pointed to a recent entry. This one was just 2 months before George passed. It says, final advance for asset transfer. Martha, this looks like they were planning this for a long time. Your husband might have been involved. The air left my lungs. My George? A part of this? It couldn't be. We'd built our life together. But the evidence was in her hands, written in his familiar, looping script. The betrayal went deeper than I had imagined. It wasn't just my children. The foundation of my marriage felt cracked. I need to see a lawyer, I whispered. A different one. Not the one they're using? Eleanor nodded, starting the car again. I know someone. Benjamin Croft. He's honest, and he specializes in elder law. We can go to his home. It's late, but he'll see us for an emergency. We drove across town, the streets quiet. My entire life had been upended in a single day. I wasn't just fighting for my money or my house. I was fighting for the truth of my own life. We pulled up to a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. Eleanor rang the bell. A man in his 60s wearing a robe answered. Eleanor? What's wrong? Ben, we need your help. It's about Martha Wilkins. Her children buried her alive today. Benjamin Croft's eyes widened. He ushered us inside quickly. As he closed the door, he looked at me, not with pity, but with a sharp, professional intensity. Start from the beginning, he said. But before I could speak, his home phone rang. He answered it, his expression turning guarded. Yes, she's here. He listened for a moment. Then his eyes locked with mine. It's for you, he said slowly. It's your son. I took the phone from Benjamin, my hand trembling. Robert's voice was calm. Too calm. Mother, I'm glad you're safe. We've been so worried. The lies slid out smoothly, each word carefully placed to pull me in. He didn't know I had the ledger. He didn't know I'd heard them in the crypt. He was playing the concerned son, and I had to play along until I understood his game. I needed to get information from him without letting on what I knew or where I was. A single wrong word could bring someone to this house, or worse, convince Benjamin I was unstable. I kept my voice even, a frail echo. Robert, where are you? What happened? He sighed, a performative sound of relief. You had a terrible episode, Mother. The doctor said it was a severe cataleptic seizure. We thought we'd lost you. We made arrangements in our grief. But when we returned to the crypt, you were gone. We've been searching everywhere. The weight of his lies was immense. He was reframing their crime as a tragic mistake, painting me as confused and unwell. I could feel Benjamin and Eleanor watching me, their faces etched with concern. I had to make them see the truth. I remember the sheet, I whispered into the phone. I remember the cold stone. There was a pause on the other end. I could almost hear his mind working, recalculating. Then his tone shifted, ever so slightly. You're clearly distressed. You need to be in a hospital, not wandering the streets. Tell me where you are. Let me come and get you. It was a command, not a request. My fingers tightened around the phone. I was about to refuse when a click echoed on the line, a second call coming in. Robert spoke quickly, his voice dropping. Stay where you are. I'll find you. The line went dead. I handed the phone back to Benjamin, my heart pounding. He looked at the caller ID. That was your daughter's number that tried to call in? The sudden shift was chilling. They were working in tandem, boxing me in. I looked at Eleanor, then at Benjamin. They aren't just looking for me, I said. They're herding me. Benjamin motioned for us to sit in his living room. We need to act fast, he said, his voice low and urgent. If they're claiming a medical episode, they could petition for emergency guardianship. That would give them control over you and your assets immediately. I knew what I had to do. Secure my legal independence before they could strip it away. If I delayed, I could lose my freedom, condemned to a supervised life in a facility, my money gone. Eleanor placed a steadying hand on my arm. What do you need, Ben? Benjamin opened a laptop on his coffee table. First, we document everything. The ledger, your statement, any witnesses. Then, I file an injunction to prevent them from acting on any power of attorney or claiming you incompetent. Every minute brought my children closer to making their story official. I pulled the ledger from my dress and laid it on the table. Benjamin scanned the pages, his expression growing grimmer. These payments are substantial. If this was a planned asset transfer, it could imply your husband was complicit in disinheriting you, or at least setting up a separate fund for Robert. The words hit me like a physical blow. George's betrayal, if true, was a wound that went deeper than the crypt. I pushed the pain down. There would be time for grief later. Now I needed to be sharp. What about the crypt? I asked. That's attempted murder. Benjamin nodded. It is, but without a body or a witness, it's your word against theirs. The ledger is our best evidence of motive. He began typing, drafting a preliminary affidavit. Suddenly, his doorbell rang. We all froze. Benjamin stood and peered through the peephole. His shoulders tightened. It's a woman. Says she's from Adult Protective Services. The arrival was a cold splash of reality. They had already escalated. They weren't just calling. They were sending officials. Benjamin opened the door a crack. A woman in a crisp suit held up a badge. I'm here for a wellness check on a Martha Wilkins. We received a report she may be a danger to herself. I saw Eleanor's eyes widen. My children had played their card, using the system against me. The social worker's gaze landed on me. Ma'am, are you all right? She asked, her tone professionally neutral. I had to choose my words with the care of a bomb disposal expert. I forced a frail smile for the social worker. I'm quite all right, dear. Just a family misunderstanding. I kept my voice light, but my mind was racing. I had to get through this without being taken into custody. If she deemed me incompetent, she could remove me from this house right now. Everything I was fighting for hung in the balance. Benjamin stepped forward, his lawyerly demeanor in place. I'm Ms. Wilkins's attorney. We were just discussing her legal affairs. There is no cause for concern. The social worker, Ms. Gable, according to her badge, remained unmoved. I have a report from her family stating she suffered a medical event, was declared deceased, and then wandered off in a confused state. I need to assess her mental capacity. The weight of the system was on me, a cold, impersonal machine my children had set in motion. I remembered the advice my own mother gave me decades ago: never let them see you sweat. I looked Ms. Gable directly in the eye. I did have a fainting spell. My children overreacted. As you can see, I am perfectly lucid. I gestured to the room, to Benjamin and Eleanor. I have friends and legal counsel. I am not alone. Ms. Gable's expression softened slightly, but she wasn't done. Can you tell me today's date? The current president? I answered correctly, my voice steady. She made a note on her clipboard. I could feel the ledger burning a hole in my dress, but revealing it now might seem like paranoia. This was a tightrope. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. Ms. Gable saw it. You may want to get that. It could be family. It was a test. I pulled out the phone. A text from Robert. Mother, please, let us help you. We're at your house. The police are here with us. They just want to make sure you're safe. The move was a masterstroke. They had involved the police, layering authority upon authority. I showed the text to Benjamin. His face tightened. Ms. Gable saw the exchange. It might be best if you come with me to the station just to sort this out, she said. The hard end was a noose tightening. They were cornering me with officialdom. Benjamin held up a hand. Ms. Gable, my client is not going anywhere. She is of sound mind and is represented by counsel. If you have further questions, you can direct them to me. His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. Ms. Gable hesitated, then nodded. Very well, but this report remains open. I will be following up. She handed Benjamin her card and left. The door closed, and the room let out a collective breath. My heart was hammering. That was too close. I needed to get ahead of them legally, to strike before they could file for guardianship. We had to move to Benjamin's office, a more secure location, and file the injunction immediately. If I waited, I would be trapped in their narrative forever. Eleanor spoke up. Your house is compromised. They have the police there. You can't go back. I knew she was right. My home, filled with a lifetime of memories, was now enemy territory. I have a safe deposit box at the bank, I said. The key is in my purse, which is still at the house. Another obstacle. Benjamin finished his draft. We can use the ledger as evidence for now. Let's go to my office. We can file electronically from there. We gathered our things quickly. The threat was now a multi-headed beast. My children, the social worker, the police. As we stepped out onto Benjamin's porch, a patrol car rolled slowly down the street. It didn't stop, but the driver's eyes scanned the houses. They were watching. We hurried to Eleanor's car. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my daughter. Mum, please. This is getting out of hand. We love you. Let us take you to the doctor. Her voice was tearful, a perfect performance. I didn't answer. I couldn't. We drove in silence toward Benjamin's downtown office. The city lights blurred past. I felt a profound weariness. This was my family. How had it come to this? As we pulled into the parking garage beneath his building, Eleanor's phone rang. She answered on the car speaker. It was her neighbor, voice frantic. Eleanor, 2 people were just at your house asking for you and an older woman. They looked official. I thought you should know. The news sent a cold dread seeping into my bones. They were tracking our allies now. We got out of the car, the garage echoey and cold. As we approached the elevator, a man stepped out of the shadows. It was the same man from the community center, the one in the suit. He smiled, a thin, unpleasant expression. Mrs. Wilkins, Your son is very concerned. He's asked me to ensure you come with me quietly. He moved to block our path to the elevator. The man in the suit stood between us and the elevator, his posture relaxed, but his eyes intent. Benjamin stepped forward. Who are you? Identify yourself. The man didn't flinch. I'm a private contractor, hired for family reconciliation. Now, Mrs. Wilkins, let's not make a scene. I needed to get past him and into Benjamin's office, where we could lock the door and call for real help. If I failed, this stranger would drag me away into whatever care my children had arranged. Eleanor gripped my arm tightly. The threat was physical now, a man hired to retrieve me like a lost package. I thought of the ledger, the evidence of their greed. It was my only leverage. I spoke, my voice stronger than I felt. You have no authority here. We are with my attorney. Step aside. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. I have a car waiting. Your daughter is in it? She just wants to talk. He gestured toward the garage exit. I didn't believe him for a second. This was an abduction, plain and simple. Benjamin pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. The man's hand shot out and knocked the phone from Benjamin's grasp. It clattered across the concrete floor. I said no scene, he growled, his civility vanishing. The situation turned violent, a shift from manipulation to force. He reached for me. I stumbled back, but Eleanor moved faster, stepping in front of me. You touch her, and I'll scream this entire building down, she said, her voice shaking but fierce. The man hesitated, glancing around the empty garage. He was calculating the risk. In that moment, a delivery van turned into the garage, its headlights sweeping over us. The driver honked, annoyed at our group blocking the way. The distraction was all we needed. Benjamin grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the stairwell door, Eleanor right behind us. We burst through the door and started climbing, our footsteps echoing in the concrete shaft. I could hear the man swearing below, but he didn't follow. We reached Benjamin's office floor, breathless. He unlocked the door, and we stumbled inside, locking it behind us. I leaned against the wall, my legs weak. We were safe, for now. But as I looked out the window, I saw a sedan pull into a spot across the street. The driver was my son, Robert. He was staring directly up at the window, as if he knew exactly where I was. He lifted his phone to his ear. My own phone, in my pocket, began to ring. I let the phone ring, the sound a tiny vibration against my leg. Robert stood like a statue across the street, his face illuminated by the glow of his own screen. He knew I was watching. This was a game of chicken, and I refused to flinch. I turned away from the window. Benjamin, we need to file that injunction now. I needed to get the legal documents submitted before Robert could escalate further. If he managed to get a temporary guardianship, I would be powerless. Any delay could cost me my freedom, my home, everything I had left. Benjamin was already at his computer, typing furiously. I'm submitting it to the court's night filing system. It'll be in the judge's queue first thing in the morning. The pressure was a physical weight. Robert's presence outside was a constant reminder that time was not on our side. Eleanor stood by the door, listening. He's still out there, she murmured. I needed something more, something to solidify my case beyond the ledger. I thought of the safe deposit box. It held the original copy of my will, the one that left everything divided equally between my children and a generous portion to a local charity. It also held my medical records, including the official diagnosis of my cataleptic condition from years ago. That document proved I wasn't delusional. My condition was real and had been documented. My safe deposit box, I said. The key is at the house. But the bank manager, Mr. Henderson, knows me. He might let me in with identification. It was a long shot, but it was a tangible step I could take. Benjamin looked up from his computer. I can't leave until this is filed. It will take another 20 minutes. The phone in my pocket finally stopped ringing. A moment of silence, then a text alert. It was from my daughter. Mum, we're so worried. The police are here with us. They say if you don't come home voluntarily, they'll have to issue a silver alert. Do you really want that? The threat was clear. A public bulletin declaring me a missing, endangered senior. It would validate their story and make me a fugitive in the eyes of the world. I showed the text to Benjamin. His face was grim. They're boxing us in. Just then, his computer chimed. The filing is submitted, he said. We had taken the first legal step, but as I looked back out the window, Robert was gone. The street was empty. A new kind of dread settled in me. Where had he gone? What was he planning next? The emptiness of the street was more unnerving than Robert's presence had been. We need to get to the bank first thing in the morning, Benjamin said, breaking the silence. With the injunction filed, they can't legally move on your assets, but having your original will and medical records will strengthen our position immensely. I nodded, but my mind was on the silver alert. If the police put that out, every busybody and do-gooder in the city would be looking for me. I wouldn't be able to move freely. I needed to get to that safe deposit box before that happened. I had to retrieve the documents from the bank to prove my sanity and my original intentions. Failure meant being hunted like a stray animal. Eleanor offered to let me stay at her sister's house for the night, a place my children didn't know about. It was a safe haven for now. We left Benjamin's office, taking the back stairs and exiting through a service entrance to avoid any watchers. The night air was cold. Eleanor drove a circuitous route, checking her mirror frequently. No one followed. Her sister, Agnes, lived in a quiet bungalow on the other side of town. She was a kind, no-nonsense woman who asked few questions and made up a bed on the sofa for me. I lay in the dark, listening to the house settle. I thought about George, about the ledger. Had he really been part of this? The pain was a dull, constant ache. I must have finally fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew, morning light was filtering through the curtains. Agnes had already left for her early shift at the library. Eleanor was in the kitchen, making coffee. "The news?" she said, her voice tense. She turned on the small television on the counter. The local morning show was on, and my heart stopped. There, on the screen, was a photo of me from last year's Christmas party. The banner at the bottom read, "Silver Alert, Martha Wilkins, 74, missing and believed to be confused and in danger." My children's faces appeared, looking distraught. Robert spoke to the reporter, his voice cracking with emotion. "Please, if anyone sees our mother, call the police. She's not well. We just want her safe." The betrayal was now public, broadcast into thousands of homes. I couldn't go to the bank now. I was a marked woman. The pressure had just become immense. I felt a wave of despair. Then I remembered the woman from the cemetery, the one with the dog. She had tried to signal me. Was she a potential ally? Or just another part of their web? I had no one else to turn to. As I stood there, frozen, Eleanor's landline phone rang. She answered it, her eyes widening. She held the receiver out to me. "It's for you," she whispered. She says her name is Clara, from the cemetery. I took the phone, my hand unsteady. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was old and raspy, but clear. "Martha Wilkins, I saw you on the news. I saw you get out of that crypt." It was the woman with the dog. "My name is Clara Evans." I live in the caretaker's cottage by the cemetery. I saw what your children did. A witness. A real, living witness to their crime. My focus shifted instantly. I needed to meet with Clara to get her statement. She was the key to proving the attempted murder, to turning the tables completely. But meeting her came with enormous risk. The silver alert meant I could be recognized anywhere. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, my voice guarded. There was a pause. My son did the same to me 20 years ago. Put me in a home, sold my house. I got out, but I had no proof. No one believed me. I believe you. Her words held a lifetime of bitter understanding. The pressure was now a race against my children's narrative, which was being broadcast across the city. "I can't come to you," I said. "The alert." "I know," Clara interrupted. "There's a small private park near the cemetery, the Rose Garden. No one goes there this early. Meet me there in 1 hour. Come alone." She hung up. I looked at Eleanor. "I have to go." She shook her head. "It's a trap, Martha. It has to be." "What choice do I have?" I asked. "She's a witness. She saw me in the crypt. Without her, it's just the ledger, and they'll say I stole it or forged it." The decision was made. Eleanor gave me a large sun hat and a different coat, a weak disguise. She drove me to within a block of the Rose Garden. I walked the rest of the way, my head down. The park was indeed deserted, just empty benches and dormant rose bushes. I saw Clara sitting on a bench, a small terrier at her feet. She saw me and nodded. I sat down beside her. She didn't look at me, but stared straight ahead. "They come here sometimes, your son and daughter," she said quietly, "to talk where no one can hear. I've listened. They're meeting their lawyer here today, at 10. She checked her watch. "In 20 minutes. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a trap she had set. I had walked into theirs. I stood to leave, but Clara put a hand on my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Wait," she said. "Look." She pointed a discreet finger toward the park entrance. A car was pulling in. It was my son's sedan. And getting out of the passenger seat was the man from the community centre, the one from the garage. He wasn't a private contractor. He was their lawyer. I froze, trapped between the bench and the approaching men. Clara's hand tightened on my arm. "The tool shed," she whispered, nodding toward a small, dilapidated building tucked behind a hedge. "Go. Now." I didn't hesitate. I ducked down and scurried toward the shed, my heart hammering against my ribs. The door was unlocked. I slipped inside, into the dim, dusty space filled with the smell of fertilizer and old wood. I left the door open a crack, just enough to see and hear. My priority was simple now. Survive and listen. If I was discovered, everything was over. Clara remained on the bench, calmly petting her dog. Robert and the lawyer, Mr. Davies, I presumed, walked to a bench not 20 feet from mine. They didn't see me. "She has to be found today," Robert said, his voice low and tense. "The injunction is filed. We can't touch the accounts until a judge hears it. And with her supposedly missing and unstable, that could go either way." Mr. Davies nodded, his expression slick and confident. "The silver alert helps us. It establishes a public record of her incapacity. We push for an emergency hearing this afternoon. I know the judge. He'll be sympathetic. We present the medical opinion of her confusion, the fact she was found in a crypt, her erratic behavior. We get the guardianship, the injunction becomes moot, and we control everything." They were so close I could see the triumph in Robert's eyes. They were discussing the legal murder of my personhood as if planning a business merger. Their success would cost me my entire identity. I needed to get out of here and get to Benjamin. We had to be at that hearing. Then Robert's phone rang. He answered, his voice shifting to a sickeningly sweet tone. "Mother? Is that you? Where are you? We're so worried." He was putting on a show for someone, likely the police or the social worker. He listened for a moment, his eyes scanning the park. "You're at the bus station? Okay, stay right there. We're coming to get you." He hung up and looked at Mr. Davies. That was her. She sounds confused. Says she's at the central bus depot. A slow, cold smile spread over Mr. Davies's face. Perfect. Let's go. We'll have her in custody within the hour. They stood and walked quickly back to their car. They thought I was at the bus station. Someone had called them, pretending to be me. Who? As their car pulled away, Clara stood and walked calmly over to the tool shed. She opened the door. "It was me," she said simply. "I used a voice changer on my phone. I bought it after my own son tried to silence me. It won't hold them for long, but it gives you time." She had just saved me. I looked at this frail, fierce woman, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had an ally who knew their tricks. "Thank you," I whispered. She nodded. "Now go. You have a hearing to get to." I hurried back to where Eleanor was waiting in the car. I told her everything as we drove toward Benjamin's office. We had to prepare for the emergency hearing Robert's lawyer had mentioned. I needed to walk into that courtroom and prove I was not the confused, helpless woman my children had portrayed. If I failed, I would be legally stripped of my rights. Benjamin was waiting for us, his face grim. "I just got the notice. The hearing is at 1 p.m. in Judge Harrow's courtroom. They're moving fast." He had printed copies of the filed injunction and the scanned pages from the ledger. "It's something. But without a witness to the burial or your medical records, it's weak. It's your word against theirs. And they have a doctor's statement about your cataleptic episode and subsequent confusion." The pressure was immense. The system was tilted against me. I thought of Clara. "We have a witness," I said, "the cemetery caretaker. She saw me come out of the crypt. She heard my children planning." Benjamin's eyes lit up. "Can you get her to the hearing?" I called the number Clara had called from. It was a landline. An answering machine picked up. I left a frantic message, pleading with her to come to the courthouse. There was no guarantee she would get it, or that she would come. We had less than 3 hours. We needed more. I remembered something else. "My neighbor, Mrs. Gable," I said. "The social worker. She saw me at Benjamin's house. She can testify that I was lucid and had legal counsel." Benjamin nodded, already dialing. He left a message with her office, formally requesting her presence as a witness. It was a long shot. We gathered our documents and drove to the courthouse, an imposing stone building that suddenly felt like a fortress I had to storm. We went through security and found the right courtroom. We were early. The room was empty except for a clerk. We took a seat on the hard wooden benches. I clutched the folder of documents in my lap. My hands were cold. At 12:50, the door opened. Robert and my daughter Sarah walked in with Mr. Davies. They didn't look at me. They sat on the opposite side of the aisle. Then the door opened again, and Ms. Gable, the social worker, walked in. She nodded politely at Benjamin and took a seat in the back of the room, observing. She had come. A small victory, but Clara was nowhere to be seen. The judge entered, and we all rose. The hearing began. Mr. Davies stood and painted a picture of a grieving family and a mentally incompetent mother who was a danger to herself. He mentioned the silver alert, the tragic misunderstanding at the crypt, my erratic behavior. Then he called Robert to the stand. Robert swore to tell the truth and began his performance, his voice dripping with false concern. I looked at the clock. It was 1:15. Clara wasn't coming. We were losing. Then the courtroom door creaked open slowly. Everyone turned. But it wasn't Clara. It was the man from the community centre and the garage. He walked straight to Mr. Davies and whispered something in his ear. Mr. Davies's confident expression faltered. He looked suddenly pale. He asked the judge for a brief recess. The judge, looking annoyed, granted it. Robert and Mr. Davies huddled with the man, their conversation intense and hushed. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw Robert's face drain of all colour. He looked over at me, and for the first time I saw not calculation or hatred, but raw, unmistakable fear. The judge's gavel cracked the silence, calling the court back to order. Robert and Mr. Davies shuffled to their seats, their earlier confidence gone. Robert's hands were clenched, his knuckles white. Mr. Davies stood, his voice unsteady. Your Honour, we request a brief continuance. New information requires our immediate attention. Benjamin was on his feet before the words faded. Objection. This is a transparent delay tactic. My client has endured enough. The judge peered over his glasses, his expression stern. What new information? Mr. Davies glanced at the man by the door, who gave a slight shake of his head. It pertains to a witness, Mr. Davies stammered. Just then, the courtroom door creaked open. Clara walked in, leaning on a cane, her terrier tucked under her arm. She met my gaze and gave a firm nod. My heart hammered. This was my chance to turn the tide. If Clara testified, she could validate my story and expose their crime. But if she faltered, the judge might still side with Robert, and I'd lose my freedom. The stakes were immense. My children's entire scheme hinged on discrediting me. Clara approached the bench. Your Honour, I am Clara Evans. I live at the cemetery. I saw this woman emerge from the crypt after her children sealed her in. I heard them discussing it later. Her words were clear and direct. Then she handed a small digital recorder to the bailiff. I recorded their conversation in the park today. Mr. Davies looked like he'd been struck. The judge played the recording. Robert's voice filled the room, cold and calculating, discussing the silver alert and the guardianship hearing. The room fell utterly silent. The judge's face darkened. He looked at Robert. I am dismissing this petition and referring this matter to the district attorney. Bailiff, ensure the parties remain until police arrive. Robert sank into his chair, his head in his hands. But as the bailiff moved toward him, Robert's phone buzzed loudly on the wooden bench. The screen lit up with a single word. Running. Chaos erupted in the courtroom. Robert jumped up, but the bailiff was faster, blocking his path to the door. Mr. Davies began gathering his papers frantically, avoiding everyone's eyes. I stood frozen, the reality sinking in. The legal battle was shifting, but the personal war was far from over. I needed to secure my physical safety and ensure Robert faced justice. If he escaped, he could still access funds or retaliate. If I failed, I would live in constant fear. Benjamin guided me out of the courtroom, Eleanor close behind. Reporters shouted questions, but we pushed through to the car. My mind raced. Where would Robert go? He had resources and desperation. As we drove away, I saw a police car pull up to the courthouse. Finally, official action. But relief was fleeting. My phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. He knows about the safe deposit box. He's heading there. The threat was immediate. Robert was one step ahead, trying to destroy evidence. I showed the text to Benjamin. We need to get to the bank now. he said, turning the car around. We arrived at the bank to see a commotion at the entrance. Mr. Henderson, the manager, was arguing with a man in a suit, the same man from the garage. He was demanding access to my box. Benjamin intervened, showing the court documents. The man backed off, melting into the crowd. We hurried inside. With my ID and the key Clara provided, I opened the box. Inside, next to my will, was a sealed envelope in George's handwriting. For Martha, if things go wrong. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter inside was a confession. George wrote that Robert had blackmailed him into signing over assets, threatening to expose an old business debt. George had been protecting me, in his own misguided way. The weight of his secret settled on me, but as I read the last line, the bank alarm blared, the lights flickered. Through the window, I saw Robert's car screech away from the curb. He had been here, watching. I clutched George's letter, the paper crinkling in my grip. His words explained so much, but they didn't erase the pain. I intended to use this letter to clear George's name and ensure Robert was held accountable. If I failed, Robert might use George's actions to justify his own, twisting the story further. Failure would mean losing my husband's legacy and my own peace. Benjamin placed a hand on my shoulder. This letter is crucial. We need to get it to the DA immediately. We left the bank, the alarm still wailing in the background. Eleanor drove us to the police station, where we met with a Detective Miller. I handed over the ledger, the recordings, and now George's letter. The detective's expression was grave. "We've issued a warrant for your son's arrest. We have units looking for him." The tension was easing, but not gone. Robert was still out there, and he knew I had the evidence. As we left the station, my phone rang. It was Sarah. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice was choked with tears. "Mom, I'm at the house. I have something for you. Please come." I didn't trust her, but I had to know. Benjamin and Eleanor agreed to come with me. We arrived at my house, the place I'd avoided for days. Sarah was waiting on the porch, her face pale. She handed me a small jewelry box. "Robert gave me this to hold. He said it was important." I opened it. Inside was a key, not for a deposit box, but for a storage unit. A slip of paper had an address scribbled on it. Sarah whispered, "He kept documents there. Things about Dad." This development was unexpected. Sarah seemed genuinely remorseful. Or was it another layer of deception? I took the key. As we turned to leave, a neighbor approached, holding my cat. "She's been hiding in my garage since all the commotion," he said. I took my cat, Mittens, into my arms. She purred softly, a tiny comfort in the turmoil. But as I held her, I noticed a familiar car parked down the street. The man from the community center was behind the wheel, watching us. He didn't move, just stared. The man's presence was a cold reminder that the danger wasn't over. I needed to check the storage unit and uncover whatever Robert had hidden. If it contained more evidence, it could strengthen the case against him. But going there risked walking into a trap. I risked my safety, or losing the element of surprise. Benjamin advised calling the police, but I felt an urgent need to see for myself. We decided to drive to the storage facility, with Eleanor following in her car for backup. The unit was on the outskirts of town, a place of metal doors and silence. Using the key, I unlocked the door and rolled it up. The space was filled with boxes and old furniture, but one box stood open on a table, stuffed with files. I sifted through them. More financial records, emails printed out, and photos of Robert with Mr. Davies at various meetings. Then I found a file labeled medical. Inside were reports from a doctor I'd never seen, diagnosing me with dementia, dated before the crypt incident. They had been planning this for months, creating a paper trail to declare me incompetent. The weight of their premeditation was staggering. They hadn't just acted in greed, they had meticulously built a case against me. As I shuffled through the papers, a small sealed envelope fell out. It was addressed to me, in Robert's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Mother, if you're reading this, I've failed. But know that Dad wanted this too. He said you were too fragile to handle the truth. The words were a knife to the heart. Was this more manipulation, or had George truly believed that? Then, Eleanor, who had been keeping watch, called out, "Martha, a car just pulled in. It's him." I looked out. Robert's sedan was entering the facility, moving slowly down the aisle toward us. There was no back exit. We were trapped in the storage unit. Robert's car stopped a few units down, but he didn't get out. The engine idled, a low rumble in the quiet. I aimed to avoid a confrontation and call for help. If he cornered us, he might become violent or destroy the evidence. The risk was too high. We had to protect the documents. Benjamin dialed 911, whispering our location. Eleanor stood by the door, ready to slam it shut. I clutched the medical file, proof of their conspiracy. The tension was palpable. Robert was desperate, and desperate people do reckless things. He revved the engine, then suddenly backed up and sped away, tires squealing. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Why had he left? We waited until police arrived, then handed over the storage unit contents. Detective Miller confirmed they had a lead on Robert's whereabouts from a traffic camera. Back at home, with new locks and a security system Benjamin arranged, I tried to settle. The house felt different, haunted by memories and betrayal. I sat in George's old chair, mittens in my lap. Then, there was a knock on the door. It was Clara, holding a pie. "I thought you could use some company," she said. We sat at the kitchen table, two old women sharing silence and understanding. She told me about her own son, the years of estrangement, and how she found peace in helping others. Her strength gave me hope. As she left, she said, "The law will handle Robert. You handle living." After she left, I went through George's things, finally ready to let go. In his desk, I found a photo of us on our wedding day, young and smiling. I held it to my chest. The hard end was a quiet realization. I had survived, and I would rebuild. But as I turned out the lights, my phone lit up with a notification. An email from an unknown sender. The subject line, "He's not working alone." The email glowed on my screen, 3 words that froze the blood in my veins. "He's not working alone." I sat at my kitchen table, the house silent except for mittens purring in my lap. My hard-won peace shattered in an instant. I needed to know who sent this and what it meant. If there were others involved beyond Robert, my safety was still at risk, and any legal victory could be undone. If I didn't find out more, I could lose everything I had just reclaimed. My hands trembled as I forwarded the email to Benjamin and Detective Miller. Then I noticed the sender's address was a random string of letters, untraceable for someone like me. The pressure was back, an invisible hand tightening around my throat. I made a cup of tea, the familiar ritual doing little to calm me. I thought about everyone involved. Mr. Davies, the lawyer, the man from the community centre, even Sarah. Was my daughter truly remorseful or playing a deeper game? I decided to visit Clara. She had a sharp mind and nothing to lose. I called her, and she agreed to meet at the park again. As I drove, I checked my mirror constantly, but no one followed. Clara was on our bench, her dog sniffing the air. I showed her the email. She squinted at it. This could be a trick to scare you, or it could be real. Someone wanting to help, or cause more trouble. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she said, I remember something. That man, the one who works with the lawyer. I've seen him with a woman. Blonde, well-dressed. They argued by the mausoleum last week. A new player. Who was she? My mind raced. As I stood to leave, Clara handed me a small folded note. I wrote down the license plate of the car she drove, just in case. I tucked it into my pocket, a tiny shield against the unknown. But when I returned to my car, I found a slip of paper under the windshield wiper. It was a printed message. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. The threat was now physical, left on my car in broad daylight. I looked around, but the park was empty. Someone was watching, and they knew where I was. I drove straight to the police station, the note clutched in my hand. I needed to report this new threat and have the license plate checked. If there was a network supporting Robert, I had to expose it before they could act. Failure meant living in fear, always looking over my shoulder. Detective Miller listened patiently, taking the note and the license plate number. We'll run this and see what comes up. But Martha, you need to be careful. Robert is still at large, and if he has accomplices, they might be desperate. The pressure was mounting. The system moved slowly, but my enemies could strike fast. Benjamin met me there, his face lined with worry. We should increase your security. Maybe a temporary move to a safe house. I refused. My home was my fortress, and I wouldn't be driven out again. Later that day, Miller called. The license plate was registered to a rental car, paid for with a corporate card linked to Mr. Davies's law firm. The blonde woman was likely another associate. But who was she? I spent the evening going through old photos and documents, looking for any connection. In a pile of George's papers, I found a birthday card from a woman named Lydia. The handwriting was elegant, the message friendly, but formal. I didn't know any Lydia. A quick online search showed Lydia was a financial advisor George had consulted years ago. Why would she be involved now? My phone rang, startling me. It was Sarah. Mum, I need to talk to you. In person. There's something I didn't tell you. Her voice was shaky. I agreed to meet at a busy coffee shop, a public place. When I arrived, Sarah was already there, looking pale. She blurted out, Lydia, Dad's advisor. Robert was working with her. She handled the money transfers from Dad. The pieces clicked into place. Lydia was the blonde woman. She had helped Robert manipulate George and was now part of the cover-up. But as Sarah spoke, I saw a man across the street, watching us through the window. It was the man from the community centre. He raised his phone and took a picture of us. I ended the conversation with Sarah quickly, my mind reeling. Lydia was the key, the financial architect of this whole scheme. I needed to confront her or get evidence of her involvement to bring her down. If I didn't, she could help Robert disappear or drain remaining assets. If I did nothing, I faced financial ruin and ongoing danger. Benjamin arranged a meeting with the DA where we presented what we knew about Lydia. They agreed to investigate, but warned it would take time. The pressure was relentless. Every moment gave the conspirators more room to maneuver. I decided to take matters into my own hands in a small way. I called Clara, and using her contacts, we found Lydia's office address. I didn't plan to confront her, just to observe. I drove there the next morning, parking across the street. Her office was in a sleek downtown building. I saw her through the window, blonde and poised, talking on the phone. Then, to my shock, I saw Mr. Davies enter her office. They embraced, not like colleagues, but intimately. They were more than associates. They were a team. This changed everything. They had a personal stake in this. As I watched, Lydia pulled down the blinds, obscuring my view. I felt a chill. I had seen too much. I started my car to leave, but the engine sputtered and died. I tried again, but it wouldn't turn over. A man approached my window, a mechanic-looking type. "Having trouble, ma'am? Let me take a look." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I locked the doors and called for a tow truck, my heart pounding. This was no coincidence. They had disabled my car. As I waited, I saw Lydia and Mr. Davies leave the building, get into a car, and drive away. They didn't look at me, but I knew they were aware. The tow truck arrived, and the driver confirmed someone had tampered with the engine. I had it towed to a shop I trusted. When I got home, there was a voicemail from an unknown number. A distorted voice said, "Next time, it won't be your car." The threat was escalating, moving from warnings to direct action. I needed to secure all my assets and ensure Lydia and Mr. Davies were exposed. I intended to work with the authorities to build an airtight case against all of them. If I failed, I might not survive their next move. I could lose my life or freedom. Benjamin helped me transfer all my accounts to a new bank, one with no ties to Lydia or Robert. I also updated my will, leaving everything to charity and a trust for any future grandchildren, cutting out Robert and Sarah entirely. It was a painful but necessary step. Detective Miller informed me that an arrest warrant had been issued for Lydia and Mr. Davies based on the evidence we provided. But they had gone underground, just like Robert. The pressure was now a waiting game, wondering when they would be caught. Clara came over with dinner, and we sat in my living room, two old women sharing a quiet meal. She told me about her life, how she found strength after her own betrayal. "You can't let them steal your peace, Martha. That's the final victory." Her words comforted me. Later that night, I received a call from Miller. "We found Robert. He was trying to cross the border into Canada. He's in custody." Relief washed over me, but it was tempered with sadness. My son, in jail. I didn't know how to feel. The next morning, I went to George's grave for the first time since all this started. I placed flowers on the stone and told him about the letter, about Robert, about everything. I forgave him for his weakness, understanding that he too was a victim of Robert's manipulation. It was a heavy burden lifted. As I turned to leave, I saw Sarah standing at a distance, watching me. She didn't approach, just nodded slowly before walking away. The hard end was a mix of closure and lingering pain. But when I got home, there was a package on my porch. No return address. I opened it carefully. Inside was a simple, framed photo of George and me on our wedding day, with a note, "For peace." It was from Clara. I placed the photo on my mantel, where it belonged. The quiet resolution I needed was settling in. I now wanted to rebuild my life, to find a new normal without fear or bitterness. Holding on to anger would only poison whatever time I had left. The legal proceedings would continue, but I decided to let the professionals handle it. Benjamin would represent me, and I trusted him. Robert, Lydia, and Mr. Davies faced serious charges, and their trials would be long, but I didn't need to be involved in every detail. I started volunteering at the local community centre, teaching a knitting class for seniors. It felt good to give back, to connect with people who had their own stories of loss and resilience. Clara became a regular visitor, and we often sat on my porch, watching the world go by, saying little, but understanding much. I sold the house. It held too many ghosts. I moved into a smaller, cozy apartment near the center of town, where I could walk to the library and the park. It was a fresh start. I adopted another cat, a companion for Mittens, and they brought simple joy to my days. Sometimes I thought about Sarah. We never spoke again, but I heard through the grapevine that she had moved to another state, perhaps seeking her own redemption. I hoped she found it. The revenge I had sought was replaced by a quiet satisfaction in having survived and protected myself. The thrill was gone, but peace remained. One evening, as I sat with my cats, watching the sunset from my new balcony, I realized that the greatest revenge was living well, on my own terms. The story was over, but my life was just beginning. I smiled, content for the first time in a long while. The quiet, personal resolution was mine to keep.